I watched every single shonen and ranked them. And you might be asking, how the f is this possible? And believe it or not, I asked the same question. And that's why I placed some guide rails to help me through this process, since without any solid steering, this masochistic video idea will literally have me watching half of all anime ever created. Since the line between what's a shonen and what's not is so nebulous that you genuinely go from Deku Detroit smashing in My Hero Academia to Denji putting on a collar and barking in Chainsaw Man. And that's all within the same fucking magazine. So I'll only be watching the series that actually came out of these shonen magazines, and also was popular enough to have an anime adaptation. So that thrusts upon us a philosophical question that has been argued since man could think. What is the worst shonen? To put this into perspective, shonen as a genre is basically the pop music of anime. It is known for producing literally the biggest hits of the medium, but what happens when it misses? Misses badly. DNA might have one of the most ridiculous, most stupidest, asinine premises I've ever witnessed in a piece of media. So, get this. In the future, Earth suffers from severe overpopulation, and when the cause of this was looked into, it didn't turn out to be because of, higher standards of living or technology or any of that bullshit. It's because of one guy that, I kid you not, had DNA so strong and pristine that by a pure glance, any woman would instantly be hypnotized into wanting to bear his children. And this man fucked so much and so hard that he ended up impregnating more than 100 women. And then those women all gave birth to sons, who then went on to impregnate 100 women of their own, and on and on. So, in the mind of the guy who wrote this, women can instantly assess the DNA of any male like they're fucking appraising them. And therefore, every single romantic decision women make is entirely based on eugenics. I'm guessing that was his excuse when he wasn't getting any. But anyways, this time cop is given the mission to find who they call the Great Playboy and inject them with a shot of DNA altering fluids that basically would turn them into a Discord mod. So let me get this straight. Your first instinct when you go back in time is to eternally cockblock some poor soul and not to kill Hitler? Or assassinate the villain who created Musically to put an end to a decade-long pipeline of brain rot before it even starts? To each their own, I guess. So the time cop pulls up to the supposed Great Playboy. that actually unironically is a funny ass name. This is the one prop I'll give this show. But it turns out that the Great Playboy surpassed everyone's conceivable expectations. He's a Reddit mod. A Discord mod is nothing to this man. He faces a girl undressing and he fucking pukes all over the floor. In the most unironic way I could possibly say this man is genuinely allergic to women. So the time cop is understandably confused, but chooses to be safe and shoot him anyways. And then it turns out that the shot actually has the opposite effect, and his genes are so hypnotizing to everyone with an XX pair of chromosomes that women get physically dehydrated by just looking at him. And I'm not even joking here. This turns into one of the worst harem animes I've ever seen that is facilitated by the single worst premise of all time. And that was the first entry into the tier I'm gonna call well done shit. So something that I realized when I thought up this Sub-Zero IQ concept for the video is that it will probably be the most contentious thing I ever put out on the internet. This genre is filled to the brim with anime that have some of the most devoted fan bases that will defend it to their grave. And you could disagree, get mad, or even get really mad, but what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not going to fold over the pressure and back down to my opinion. I have some extremely controversial picks coming up, so get ready. Oh look, another accidental boob grab. Oh look, another accidental ass grab. Oh look, he tripped and fell face first into some random girl's private parts again. Oh look, he got slapped again. Oh look, he got kicked again. Oh look, she turned up in his bed in the morning again. To love Ru is like if you shit on a stick, roasted it, put crackers on the outside, and then you tried to call it a s'more. Okay, I was actually thinking of ways to explain how this analogy is related to the show, but I just gave up. I don't think I've ever despised a protagonist more than this fucker. He makes those generic tropey clueless harem main character guys look like geniuses. The plot is basically just a vehicle to facilitate the fan service, which takes up like 80% of this entire show. How this was published in the most popular manga magazine of all time, I don't know. I'm not asking questions. I'm just going down the list. Hakyu Hoshin Enji is a series that assaults you on every level. It might have gotten the single worst adaptation on this list. 20 episodes to cover 200 chapters. That puts us at an average of 10 chapters per episode. To put this absolute clusterfuck of an adaptation into perspective, it's like if you took the pacing of Promised Neverland Season 2, which is widely considered to be one of the worst adaptations in anime, and you decided to run it back, but this time as an any percent speedrun. Why even make the adaptation at that point? These guys were probably in the planning stage looking at the Berserk 2016 anime and were like, okay, we should plunge the fans of this franchise into nihilistic anguish in the same way they did when watching this anime, but let's do it our own way. We're just thrown into this random world inhabited with random characters. The show doesn't even bother to give us introductions. Quite literally, we will see a character make some big statement, get power-ups, and then be killed off all in the span of 2 minutes. All while never introducing us to that character in a natural way that wasn't shoehorned in. All of the plot points in this anime just feel stitched together so poorly that even if you read the manga, you'd be completely confused on what's going on. Yuna in the Haunted Hot Springs is what happens when you're so focused on rubbing one out that every other element of the show besides the woman's boobs and ass have absolutely no presence. Even when this show really tries its hardest in attempting to tell a story and focus, I guess they keep getting distracted because the camera always ends up panning to the horniest spots so as to not edge the viewer for too long, I guess. This anime is about a psychic that exorcises spirits and shit, and he ends up living at this hot spring house with a bunch of women. At the end of the day, this anime is only concerned with flaunting its woman, letting the audience self-insert into this idiot, while doing the classic lucky pervert trope at any instance it can, while systematically having our main protagonist conquer almost every existing female in the universe one at a time through happenstance. This show truly has no value on this planet. Gooners, just go watch hentai. Plot enjoyers, you watch hentai as well. So those are my picks for the worst of the worst in this genre. If you thought you were gonna see some big names in this tier, you have no idea the sheer amount of filth that this magazine has been rapid firing since the 1960s. So in this next tier, we're cranking down the fire and going over the medium rare shit. We'll see a lot more filth too, but also some named characters in this tier too. Oh, and I kind of forgot to explain my criteria for ranking stuff. So it's simple, it's just 50% based on writing, where I try to rate it as objectively as possible, and 50% based on the enjoyment that I personally got from it. And the reason why I decided to do it this way is because obviously I have my own biases. Like if I had my way, every single harem show would be shipped off to the lowest tiers, irrespective of quality. But I also wanted the list to feel less robotic and make it so I can inject my monkey brain subjective takes into the mix. Pros of Medica Box. Medica's rack. A lot of characters. If you like characters, you could find them in this anime. There's an opening and ending song. Wacky, random, crazy zaniness. There's a second season. Cons of Medica Box. Medica isn't real. Oh, that's actually kind of sad. Medica Box is the anime of all time. It's up there with a select few titles for being so dramatically dull that I really wish I didn't watch it. It's generic, which isn't always bad, but it's also mediocre. A level of mediocrity that I've never seen before watching Medica Box. There's nothing offensive or out of place in Medica Box. Somehow when you're being dragged along by the show, you are never surprised. Anything could happen, so therefore nothing happens. It's a joke with no punchline, a trip with no destination. I think what we're experiencing here is true liminal space, where the laws of physics collapse into itself, and we're all just confused on how this has a 7 rating out of 10 on my anime list. And then you realize that everyone's probably just jacking into this shit. Yu-Gi-Oh! Wait, hold on. I just have one thing to say. Before you do all that, just try rewatching a couple of episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2024 and come back here, because that is the experience I'm about to relate to all of you. Not when I watched a couple of episodes as a stupid kid, but when I physically cringed to it today. Although, to be perfectly fair, I know a lot of people have nostalgia towards the show, so I'll try to be as considerate as possible when reviewing it. This anime feels like it was written by an 8-year-old on an acid trip. The characters are all nonsensical and none of what they say or do make any sense. Like Yugi's grandpa owning an entire card shop for him to have fucking one rare card in stock, and then explaining how it's his most precious treasure that he'd rather give up his own life than sell. Then in the next frame he offers up that same card to the victor of a card duel that he'll take part in. Then he loses and suffers such a colossal ass whooping that he gets sent straight to the hospital. From losing in a kid's card game. You know what I said before about it being written by an 8-year-old on an acid trip? Well, I was mostly in jest, but as I talk about it more and more, it's starting to seem like the only explanation. This card has 1500 attack power. That means whenever I attack the enemy with this card, they will lose 1500 life points. And that's a good thing because if the enemy player runs out of life points, I win the game. Wow, that's incredible. I guess that means the enemy player will have to try his hardest to not get hit by your card. That's right, it just goes to show you how powerful this 1500 attack power is. Imagine sitting through this dialogue as a grown-ass man, watching these characters pretend that a virtual card game causes them physical pain. You had to be there at a certain time and age. But just because it's so intensely nostalgic for so many people doesn't mean people can't admit that the shit they're nostalgic for is shit. But at the end of the day, I don't really care if you keep those rose-tinted glasses on. I liked fucking Fanboy and Chum Chum as a kid, so my opinion is automatically invalid. If there were one character I'd punch, one character I'd waterboard, one character that I'd grab and do the spin like they do in the hammer throw and chuck him off the bridge on this list, it'd be Kazuya Kinoshita. Many people run to this show's defense, being like, oh, well, Rent a Girlfriend is actually realistic because there are actually people out there that are like this and would rent a girlfriend if they could. And yeah, you're right. But what's your fucking point? He's still a spineless, degenerate, pathetic, cringe, slimy greaseball of a protagonist that is seriously just a terrible person in general. Yes, sometimes realism in shows ultimately enhance the experience, but that doesn't mean you go out of your way to cast fucking Chris Chan as your main character. And it's not even the fact that he's a bad person. I do like some shows where horrible people act as the show's main characters, but in those shows, none of them are rewarded for being a worthless scumbag. All of the women in this show, stunningly, start actually falling for Kazuya after he literally bought them to go on a date with him. It's like if some OnlyFans girl fell in love with the 500th dude to text her AI chat box that's pretending to be her. If this is your guilty pleasure, that's fair. If there's no guilty part within you while watching this show, seek help. Arms Alchemy starts out with a boy observing a girl in an alleyway, and then what? Hentai penetration? I want some of that action. And then the guy runs in to steal her show, and then he gets penetrated in a way that he probably wasn't expecting. This anime is mediocre, in a way that words really can't describe. Everything is mind-numbingly predictable, the power system is as bland as white American cooking, and the worst crime it commits is that it's seriously just corny. Okay, that might be unfair because I watched this in dub, but either way, there's nothing original here. The dialogue is crap, the character's got "he's right behind me, isn't he" type of energy, and the world is just uninspired. Kinniku Mensai is a show that's somehow able to turn brutal violence and gory dismemberment into a fart joke extravaganza. And under normal circumstances, I'd give the author props for even being able to do that shit, but what I've gained to realize is that if your serious scene is all just culmination to a joke, and that joke isn't fucking funny, it kind of just digs its own grave. The entire show isn't really funny to me, like at all. And genuinely, the only saving grace that this show has is it got a 4Kids dub, which is honestly just art. Just listen to this.
Wrestlers race to our defense with strength and speed and flatulence.
Ring ni Kakuro is a pretty authentic boxing anime with some pretty cool fights in a... Wait a second. What the fuck did he just do? Did he just throw out a Kamehameha in the fucking boxing ring? Oh no, we have another stinker in our hands. Okay, this is one of those sports animes that have those bullshit anime superpowers, but when other shows do it, at least the superpowers are cool and actually somewhat pertain to the sport. In this show, the author had the genius idea that if he smashed two popular shonen together, that it'd create for a more popular shonen. But no. Mixing Hajime no Ippo and DBZ was a fucking terrible idea. The powers are lame, the action is garbage, and the characters are boring, and I'm definitely hating, but it's deserved. Trust me. Rurouni Kenshin is made by a pedophile. It's a classic, and I absolutely enjoyed the few episodes I watched. But usually I'm good with separating art from the artist. Like, I've been defending listening to Kanye for the past 2 years, but especially when the guy is literally by objective metrics a menace to society, it's just hard to put this show any farther up. Sorry, Rurouni Kenshin fans. Sexy Commander Gaiden is really old, and I guess back then you couldn't say the word gay lest you bear the risk of being burned at the stake. So this guy calls himself the fucking Sexy Commander, and his trademark is that he always takes his pants off before he fights. Listen, I'm not homophobic. I'm just Sexy Commander phobic. Like, that shit's freaky. Was this really the state of Shonen Jump before One Piece? Okay, let me go on a tangent. Tom and Jerry came out in 1940. Bugs Bunny came out in 1960. And Roadrunner came out in 1966. So why does anime in 1994 look like a drunk 5-year-old scribbling compared to shit released 30 years before this? Actually, even compared to other anime, Yu Yu Hakusho came out 2 years before this anime and is genuinely night and day. Totemo Lucky Man is not a fun show to look at. It's about a superhero that fights aliens, but his superpower is just getting incredibly lucky all the time. This show was probably made for kids anyways. I never laughed. Ichigo 100%. This one had me disappointed. I thought this shit was gonna be a Bleach spinoff because, you know, Ichigo, but it's a fucking harem. So I found out that the English name for the show is Strawberry 100%. So let me get this straight. Ichigo translates to strawberry. So the main character of Bleach is named Strawberry. That's cool. So this anime that I've been procrastinating to talk about is, honest to God, just one of the strongest waste of times I've had on this list. This idiot over here just walked out of the harem protagonist copy room, and immediately as he's out the door, he's gawking under some anime girl's skirt. This is the most unoriginal love triangle show I've ever had the dissatisfaction of watching. The characters are flatter than flat earth, and even devout harem enjoyers would hate this shit because of how it never goes anywhere. I joke that it's edging the viewer for the entire show, but literally there's just nothing even here that anyone would edge to. Muhyo and Roji's Bureau of Supernatural Investigation is just Mob Psycho, but if it were stripped of everything that made it funny or charming or made the viewer feel anything, it's just about this duo of two guys that I just want to say look hella drawable. And I know they literally are drawings, but this would be the type of character design that my unartistic ass would end up accidentally drawing. And this is coming from the guy whose artistic ability peaked when I camouflaged a dick inside my freshman art project and the teacher never realized. So this guy looks stupidly annoying and the other guy is stupidly annoying, and they team up to form the Wonder Squad, who investigate paranormal situations and spirit possession. I used to love throwing around the word mid like it was my Tourette's tick or something, but now I feel like that word has kind of lost its meaning. Like, no, the Borderlands movie is not mid. That shit's a whole ass abomination. And this too is a mid. It's just shit. I don't know who'd sit down and watch 12 episodes of this thing voluntarily, and I genuinely don't know who'd be for. Otoko Ibiki Gaki Daisho was the first weekly Shonen Jump anime adaptation coming out in 1969. Wow. But to be honest, that's all it's really special for, since nothing that this show offers today would be something I consider to be not cliched. But that's just how things are. This came out like, what, 55 years ago? So of course it's gonna be outdated from both the delinquent storyline and animation standpoint. Okay, believe me or not, I really did not want to come in here guns blazing shitting on Fairy Tail like I'm the first guy on the internet to ever do it. But I have to. Listen, I loved this show as a kid and I really don't have any ill will against it. So when I say that it's a show that's best enjoyed by kids, I say it with its best intentions in mind. My rewatch of this show was a little bit like a FromSoft game. As I watched more and more episodes, more and more of my nostalgic memories die. And the dialogue is some of the worst I've had to sit through. The fan service is just insufferable with how frequent it is, and the plot never felt like it culminated to anything. Every single arc just felt like reruns of the last one with different coats of paint, and it always follows the same script. Fairy Tail hears about a villain. The crew goes out to beat villain. One crew of members is put in danger, and evil bad guys are too strong for Natsu to handle. Cue flashback about I don't know, his dead goldfish when he was a kid. Then through the power of friendship, he gains his plot armor and triumphs over the bad guy. Granted, I didn't rewatch 130 episodes, but if you can't stake yourself in 30, then what are you doing? The characters are genuinely the one speck of enjoyment I had with the show, but the writing ruins that as well, with everyone just repeating the same quips 20 times over. It was a little funny at first, but not the 15th. And over the course of everything I watched, not one character changed at all. Black Cat would genuinely be my favorite anime of all time if I watched it when I was 14. To a person who frequents r/I'm 14 and this is deep, this show is orgasmic. It's got everything you could possibly need. A mysterious loner assassin main character, gory action. Did I mention the protagonist was an edgy badass already? So he's a notorious assassin dude who's known as the Black Cat, and he works for this shadowy organization called Kronos. Kronos? Are you serious right now? It feels like this author is improvising. But eventually he chooses to distance himself from the organization and decides to walk the virtuous path of an honest bounty hunter. Is this a joke? A virtuous, honest bounty hunter. He's still fucking killing people. He's acting like he became some completely different person, when in actuality he went from a serial killer on payroll to a murderer on payroll. And these words that he walked the virtuous path of a bounty hunter, and not even my words, it's directly from the official synopsis. Okay, I know I've just been counting on this, but seriously, I dislike how the main character makes such a 180 in terms of morals and personality over a fucking time skip. It's cool that he's a pacifist and he's smoking marijuana now, but I would have liked to see the progression to him completely changing as a human being. If I were to give this show one due, it would have to be Sven. He's a cool character. But unfortunately, there's no Sid Kagano in the show, so this shit's ass. So we're coming up on the shit that I would understand if people would enjoy it. But to me, it's mid shit. So before I move on, I want to know how in my video where I ranked every single isekai, I gave a 3-episode rule because there's such a sheer volume of shows out there. But in Shonen, it's less shows, but they're all more dense. So obviously I can't place an episode rule because in some places I'd be watching 40% of the show, and in others I'd literally be watching 0.4% of the show. And if you're asking how much of a show I actually watched, the answer is it depends. But usually at the end of the second arc of whatever show I'm watching. Although I've been watching anime for my entire life, so I'd say I've already watched like maybe 75% of these in full before even thinking about this video. Oh, and also I'll only be ranking the animes of these series. If the manga is better, tell me in the comments because I'm actually curious. But as you'll eventually see, there are 2 exceptions I made for this rule. Katekyo Hitman Reborn has a mafia boss baby with a gun, and his first interaction with the main character is fucking capping him in the head. This anime was around the same time that the big 3 were dominant, like early 2010s, and I actually watched it and really enjoyed it as a kid, and that's why I was absolutely horrified to start watching it for this video. I didn't want killing my childhood nostalgia to become the theme of this video, and guess what happened? This show is definitely not something I'd recommend right now because the anime adaptation is definitely outdated. It has that feeling, you know? It's one of those shows that has a really poor start. Although in this case, the start I'm talking about is about 20 episodes. Reborn seriously carries the entire series up until this point, and Reborn is that baby. The writing and cast of characters are just so fucking shonen. I was rewatching this with my brother since we originally watched it together as kids, and we'd always point out like it was a recurring meme how it'd show all the men doing action battle shonen stuff, and then it'd switch scenes and cut to the woman cast of characters, and they'd always be doing like cooking or cleaning or doing laundry. The action isn't bad. I actually enjoyed when they introduced the boxes in the later arcs, but the characters are so weak and the writing was below average that I would honestly just avoid this in 2024. Nero Supernatural Detective is about a high school detective girl who solves a ton of cases, but it turns out that it was never her solving anything. It was this demon guy, Nero, who's pretty much just obsessed with true crime and came down, or up, I guess, to Earth specifically to search for the ultimate mystery. There's a lot to enjoy with this anime. You got Nero, where I honestly don't know what the author was smoking when he drew up this character design. The bro got the poop highlights in his hair. Otherwise, the show has a good charm to it, although the mysteries themselves are a little juvenile. They're so painfully predictable that I honestly am under the opinion that this was most likely made for a younger audience. You know when you're scrolling through Netflix or whatever streaming site to pick a movie, and then there's always a category that's like movies to watch with the family. I despise this shit with every fiber of my being. I used to always be wanting to watch like some Mission Impossible type cool shit as a kid, but everyone always ended up picking fucking Daddy Daycare. This anime, Midori no Makibao, would safely fit inside that stupid ass category. The main character is a horse, and it follows the horse through its experience becoming a racehorse. Chill premise, but unfortunately I found pretty much all the characters to be insufferable. Plot was interesting, but the writing was just okay, and I personally absolutely did not fuck with the art. Jingoku Sensei Nube is about if Sukuna was forced into the plot of Assassination Classroom. So the main character is this teacher whose left hand was possessed by a demon, but this demon hand gives him the power to sense other demons and spirits so he can protect his students. And that sounds all well and cool, but it practically just devolves into your typical monster of the week style of show, and I'm really not a fan of that. Kochi Kame is literally the worst cop I've ever seen. Okay. You know what? I take that back. But he's up there. He's corrupt, he doesn't even do his job, and he's literally an active menace to society. The police chief guy is basically Benson from regular show, just without a ball sack for a head. And this show is another episodic one. And I don't mind episodic if it's a comedy, but it was never funny to me at all. And the characters are all forgettable. And apparently this manga is longer than One Piece. I don't even have words. That's just insane. I personally did not see anyone actively discussing the new chapters of Kochi Kame, but who knows. Ninku is about a post-war world where our main characters are part of a group of ninjas called Ninku who fought in World War I but eventually disbanded, and all of them are being persecuted by a corrupt government. At first, I was gleeful. Seeing that this will be one of the rare old shonens to actually have an overarching plot made me start rejoicing, but of course, my disappointment is immeasurable. My day is ruined. This quickly transitioned to episodic form, and it's not even good episodic. None of these minor conflicts ever felt compelling at all, and this show never really gripped me. Captain Tsubasa got a new shiny coat of paint, but it was jarringly clear to me from a storytelling standpoint that this was very old. Like 1981 type of old. Captain Tsubasa is a football series that was probably written while the bubonic plague was going on, and it got an adaptation almost 40 years after the original manga release. It's about this football prodigy that moves to a new town and joins the football club while clashing heads with his rivals. Although there's not a lot of depth or substance to anything going on, and most of the characters feel one-dimensional. That's not to say that the entire show is completely unenjoyable, and it's understandable if you fuck with it. For me though, I'm not the biggest fan of the archaic shonen style of writing, where every character has to be this straight shot bullet that embodies specific archetypes, more than just being a rounded, fleshed out character. Kimagure Orange Road is an anime about a guy in a love triangle, and it really only fulfills the first half of the genre it lies in. Saying this is a rom-com would be a disservice to humor as an art form. Look, I literally make anime YouTube videos, so I've built a tolerance to a lot of the comedy culture that anime exists in, although for the first time in a while, I just cringed watching this shit. Maybe it just really isn't my thing, but I don't know. Hallelujah Boy is about the literal son of God who gets banished down to earth because he's too much of a bum. But you won't read about this in the Bible, since this alternate world Jesus Christ lives his life out virtuously as a petty Japanese delinquent. You know, I think I'm actually making this sound more interesting than it actually is, but believe me, this is just a below average 90s delinquent anime. But the main character can materialize frying pans. Cat's Eye is about a group of 3 sisters who run a shop during the day, but as night falls under the alias of Cat Eyes, they rob art galleries in hopes of gaining clues as to where their long lost artist's father is. I do fuck with Phantom Thief shows from time to time, but if you have a premise like this, and then it turns out to be an episodic, redundant collage of episodes, it's just impossible to salvage. Kind of reminds me of Scooby-Doo, but like, not really. Saint Seiya is a classic. Or so I've heard. The only thing I ever knew about this show was that people talked about it in the same breath as Dragon Ball and the Fist of the North Star. So I went into it, and it's okay, it's set in this world where people who devote themselves to the god of war, Athena, became saints, which are basically just like superheroes. And Seiya is a saint in training. Although the problem I have with this show are mostly about the fights and the consequences of those fights. Usually when the author wants stakes, the fights would always seem unwinnable, and then boom, Deus Ex Machina. But then when a fight does swing the other way and a character sacrifices themselves for one reason or another, there are literally no consequences. They just get infinitely rezzed. Also, my enjoyment was affected because I feel like even for its time, the adaptation was subpar. I looked it up and it was released the same year as DBZ, so there's literally no excuse. That's just my opinion of it in 2024. If you like it, that's chill. So I watched the newer Shaman King adaptation because I racially discriminate against older anime, and it was alright, I guess. So shamans are these people with the supernatural ability to see ghosts and spirits and shit. They also fight, and there's this whole power system with them. So a tournament arc is held once every 500 years where the shaman who wins becomes basically just God. And that seems like a very interesting premise, but maybe I fucked myself over by watching the newer version over the older one, because the pacing was all over the place, it felt like. The characters I never really cared for, probably as a byproduct of not establishing any rapport with them because of the pacing. And then at times, the fights are genuinely Record of Ragnarok type of slideshows. Sorry if I did this anime a disservice by watching the newer one, but I honestly can't find an enemy to check out the older ones too and rewatch everything. The rise of the yokai clan is decent. It's about this half yokai, half human boy who's the heir to a prestigious yokai clan. And if you don't know, yokai are basically just like spirits and paranormal creatures. And so he attends high school, of course, because, you know, shonen. If the premise of a shonen was about how the government placed a national ban on all of education, these authors would somehow still find a way to make their show happen in high school. But he makes friends with these kids who are obsessed with proving the existence of yokai, and they get into some crazy wacky situations. And I don't know if this was supposed to be funny or not, because I didn't laugh. And honestly, other than being a comfort show, I don't really know what else this show really offers compared to its relatives in the same genre. The fights are kind of lame, and the characters are pretty weak in my opinion. Dr. Slump is a series that you might have never heard of, but it was the first manga and anime adaptation of the legend himself, Akira Toriyama. And while it can be funny at times, the comedy isn't consistently funny, at least to me, so that's why it's down here. Just like most artists, Toriyama didn't find his calling on the first go, and it would take some experimenting for him to find it. But Dr. Slump is about a scientist that creates an android girl, Arel, and they live in this wacky town where a ton of absurd situations are forced upon both the Doctor and Arel. While it wasn't my favorite thing, I found it interesting to see what Toriyama was up to back in 1981. Charge! Men's Private School is another old delinquent anime with a different coat of paint. There are actually story arcs in this, but in essence it's episodic because the end of the arcs are always inconsequential, or the story just resets to before it ever happens. There's only one high-ranking episodic show, and that's a comedy show. I really don't have patience if the show is trying to tell a real story and then everything just resets after the episode's done. Nah, I don't like that shit. Whistle is a football anime that has a main character who's shit at the game. So he's a very relatable guy who may not have the qualities that make a striker, but he never gives up. The anime got a pretty poor production. I mean, yeah, I know it's old, the aspect ratio is melting my eyeballs, but even for its time, it looks kind of shit. And nowadays, story-wise, I'd literally prefer to watch any other sports anime that you'll see coming up. So just comparing it to others in the same genre, I'm putting it down here. Black Clover is an experiment to see how loud of a decibel reading you could get from a single character. This bitch is never not screaming for no reason. Overall, Black Clover is the fast food of shonen. It's a show that just feels like an amalgamation of a ton of different shonen that turns out to be very unrefined. But I think the worst part about this show is its characters. Listen, I'm a huge fan of dumb idiots in animation. Like Patrick from SpongeBob is chill as fuck. This guy is just fucking annoying to me. The whole underdog facet about him where he comes from a rural village while all the Magic Knight dudes are royals lasts for like 2 seconds because this guy was granted the ability to literally cancel out all of magic, which is the main power system. That ain't sound like no underdog to me. The other characters include a tsundere, a troglodyte that gets fucking nosebleeds from talking to his little sister, a prostitute, a meth head, and this girl who just eats. Okay, you know what? I actually like Charmy, she's alright. but a lot of the other characters genuinely just make this show insufferable to watch. The writing is just not great across the board with these characters. I see why a lot of people may enjoy this though. The fights are pretty well done across the board, and while I don't fuck with a lot of the characters, with a Yami exception, I bet a ton of people can find something redeeming in this sister-loving freak show. Although I stick with the fact that the writing is very juvenile in this show, and the villains are some of the worst in the genre. At least earlier on, because I've probably only got around episode 50 when I first watched it. And I know this shit has like 300 episodes. So maybe it gets better, I don't know. Seven Deadly Sins was something I thought was the coolest thing in the world when I was like 13. I remember liking the really buff dude with the mustache and the giant girl for no particular reason. So I rewatched it and I have a comment. This feels like Gen Z Dragon Ball, but it's worse. In Dragon Ball, the least I can say is that pretty much all the characters are likable, charming dudes that always grasp my attention. The only thing that Meliodas grasps are Elizabeth's boobs. And his only other redeeming quality is being put in those top 10 anime where the MC loses control of his demonic power videos. No, but seriously, I do not enjoy seeing any of these characters on screen. Bam is in love with the fucking lolly, and if I see anyone in the comments going, oh, she's actually 300 years old, you're getting fucking court-martialed and tried for public execution. The giant girl has absolutely no personality, and actually none of the women have personality. And the only cool character in this show is Astronaut. I've regressed back to my old ways of thinking, but come on, he's just fucking cool. You can't deny it. Also, I feel like the villains are especially weak in this show. They're either throwaway, cartoonishly evil goofballs, or some demon from 4,000 years ago that I was never given a reason to be afraid of. I think generally, if a show has an excess of fan service, that's basically an admittance that the show isn't confident in its ability to keep the audience's attention, and so they thrust soft porn into the viewer's face to literally tit-fuck their way to keep people watching. So when I watched Fire Force, going into it after hearing all the complaints about a gruesome amount of fan service, my expectations were not very high to say the least. And initially, I was kind of optimistic about the show going into the first few episodes. I really fucked with the power system and just the world in general. But the issues started to form when they started introducing a ton of characters and also tried to develop those characters. A ton of Fire Force characters have their one trait that they show off whenever they get screen time. Like Takaki, who thought she was a chatterbait streamer because it seems like her only point in existing is getting her boobs or ass into someone's face. Then Arthur, who obsesses over being a knight and calls himself one just because he fights with a sword. And then there's the main character, Shinra, who can't control his smile. But then when the show tries to characterize these guys, it just ends up being some sad flashback that doesn't have much relevance to the characters now. So they just remain flat for the entire show. And also, this show tries to be funny a lot, but for me at least, the comedy never hit. The action turned out to be the only redeeming thing about the show. Hamburgers that grow out of the ground like 4-leaf clovers. Mountain ranges carved out like ice cream. And mac and cheese hidden within the belly of a volcano. This is the world of Toriko. Exists within the gourmet age, where so many different types of food exist, and these people called gourmet hunters strive to taste every single dish this world has to offer. And our main characters are gourmet hunters, so this is pretty interesting because while other shonen have the main character striving to kill some eldritch evil or saving the world from some impending doom, this anime is just like, fuck all that, I'm doing my own thing. And that's pretty cool to me. However, with a premise like this, I expected it to be at least a little funny. And I don't know if it just wasn't my thing or if it barely tried, but I didn't really laugh at all. I could see how people would love this show. I mean, it's just vibes, and the One Piece collab was crazy. Although for me, it was just okay. What is the best Power Rangers? Fuck astrology signs or any of that bullshit. Real men should identify with their favorite Power Rangers era. Mine either gotta be Mystic Force or Dino Thunder. Both of them were the coolest shit in the world to me. Out of the masses of mid inside this tier, I think Go-Go Loser Ranger had the most potential out of all of them to be something. All of the parts are there to be a really fun and well executed subversion of the usual Power Ranger tropes. And I think this show has the premise to pull off a great hit, but lost the plot halfway through and because of some questionable choices in writing. First First of all, this show does a really poor job at establishing tone. Obviously, shows can bounce between polar opposite tones and still be natural, but I think it takes a level of skill in writing to be able to accomplish that. In this show, the tone disparity is so jarring that we'd literally get the Red Ranger doing some evil, subversive Omni-Man type fucked up shit, and then we cut to like some goofy scene that culminates into a fart joke or some shit. None of the characters' reactions to things feel realistic, and honestly the writing when it comes to the characters in general, whether it be their personalities or character arc, are just the worst part of this show. And that wraps up the mid shit. So now we come to the point of the video that I'm sure will spark war. And although the tier is called the good shit, the placements within this tier, I'm sure for a lot of people, will just be outright blasphemous. Typical, ordinary, commonplace, drab. These are the ingredients to make the most generic shonen known to man. But they accidentally added an extra ingredient. Bitch-ass main character. My Hero Academia. The worst popular new gen shonen out there. Binging My Hero Academia is like binging TV Static for 72 hours. It barely made it above mid-tier by the thinnest margin. Okay, I'll admit, I enjoyed the first maybe 2 seasons of the show. The characters were mostly all annoying. Like, I don't understand how people actually like Bakugo. But I actually fucked with the world and some of the villains. Stain was my favorite. But as I watched more and more seasons, I started wondering when they would change up the formula. A lot of highly regarded shonen shows follow the path of starting out relatively generic, and eventually, after establishing itself, it would push the envelope in some type of way. My Hero never did that. The fights are above average, the writing is average, the characters are below average. And overall, it's ultimately just a slightly above average shonen show. There's not a single thing that this show does that others in the same genre haven't done better. Nothing wrong with liking it. I had the first couple of seasons, but eventually it just got old. Oh, and also, I don't think I've hated a traditional shonen protagonist more than Deku. If Drake starred in his own shonen, I'd like him better than Deku. So the only thing I knew about World Trigger before making this video were the CGI, creatures that look like a mix between Appa from Avatar and like a miniature Godzilla. Overall, I think World Trigger is pretty good. The adaptation was not bad, but not great. And half of the cast of characters in this show I hate, and the other half are chill. Look, I've been wearing glasses for my entire life, so when I see a character being called Four Eyes or some other generic insult, I just gravitate towards rooting for them. That is to say, I tried to like this motherfucker, but I ended up despising his ass. He gives our kind a bad rap. I'm ashamed to be associated with this bitch. He's somehow more annoying than those ironic impressions of the nerd emoji. He's pathetic, but I never found it in me to pity him. He always tries to act like he's the protagonist hero, but he gets clapped like 100% of the time. And then Kuga is alright. This anime is set in an apocalyptic world where these creatures called neighbors wreak havoc. I don't know exactly why the author would call the fucking horsemen of the apocalypse something that seems so harmless like neighbors, but it doesn't really matter. So this agency develops called the Border Defense Agency, who use weapons called triggers to fight against the neighbors. I still can't get over that name, but even describing a tiny bit more of the plot will end up spoiling a lot, so if you're interested, you should just go and watch it. Hatsukoi Limited starts as we're following a group of high school girls who are engaging in normal girl talk, and then the topic of love confessions get brought up, and this one girl, Ayumi, really wants anyone to confess to her. And then as she's talking about how looks don't matter, boom, black person. Okay, he's not actually black, but who are you trying to fool? He spawns in and confesses his love for Ayumi, and as the rest of the girls are busy fainting and hyperventilating over seeing some melanin, she's just afraid of what happened to her if she rejected him. So she makes the executive decision to wait to tell him her answer. Then as she mulls over whether she should accept the BBC or reject it, she falls for this guy, who turns out to be the delinquent's brother. The whole show takes up a whole new perspective, where I genuinely think this is the only show on this list to star a girl. I'll update you on that. But this has a whole new comedic angle on gags, and it delivers most of the time, at least for me. We Never Learn Bokuben is a non-harem anime. The whole harem shit in anime is probably my least favorite trope in the whole medium. All the girls are just factory-produced anime girls to be dominated and charmed by the ferocious virginity of the anime protagonist. They usually have the stupidest main characters I've ever seen in media. Like, you're telling me that if you were forced into a situation where you had to choose between Kim Kardashian, Ice Spice, and Zendaya, and you have the luxury of just throwing your hands in the air and choosing all of them, that you can't make a decision for 12 episodes. Like, and in some of this shit, we see the main character even reject fucking men. So now that I can't call these protagonists gay in a totally scientific manner, I wonder if they have no sexual desire. I mean, who knows? It might be possible. Maybe they just reproduce asexually. So yeah. Point being, I wasn't getting hyped to watch a show where some nerd only tutors girls and finds himself in the harem in T-minus 30 seconds after the show starts. Although, I was pleasantly surprised when the girls actually had personalities outside of just wanting to literally dick ride the main character, and they actually had some pretty fun interactions. Blue Exorcist is about a kid who is fostered by a priest who also happens to be the son of Satan. Eventually, he vows to never join his father and demonkind, and decides that he's gonna become an exorcist. This premise is kinda metal. It's like Dog Nigga, but if Rex only wanted to kill his dad instead of doing that other thing. So I was quite pulled into the story. It had everything going for it to be a hood classic, like a pretty sick power system, the fact that motherfucking Satan is his daddy, and then I also enjoy the world of Blue Exorcist in general. But I don't know if this is an anime only thing, but I feel like a lot of these arcs, in air quotes, feel episodic. Not like, you know, actually episodic, but it feels as if there's like barely any real progression being made after each arc has concluded. And although I enjoy Rin as a character and as a concept, he's kind of just your commonplace all brawn, no brain shonen protagonist that I've already seen like 100 times already, so I'm kind of numb to it. Nisekoi is an uncharacteristic harem rom-com published in Weekly Shonen Jump, which immediately made me curious and asked a lot of questions. Like, is the power scaling gonna be the protagonist picking up anime women with larger and larger chest sizes? Is the main character's outlandishly shonen goal to rizz up Livy Dong? These were questions I needed answers to. So this anime is about the main character making a promise to a childhood friend about getting married in the future. And since they won't see each other for a while, they both keep a lock and a key so that when they meet in the future, they can each recognize each other. But as the protagonist gets to high school age, he shockingly meets two girls who have an identical key set. It's a nice spin on the conventional harem schlop out there, and I really appreciate this show for what it is. The production is amazing. I mean, I knew I was going to be eating good when I saw that Studio Shaft was behind this. Although at the end of the day, I'm not really the biggest fan of rom-coms outside like Kaguya-sama, so my enjoyment wasn't that crazy. Silver Fang follows Jin, a dog, and their entire pack as they try to gather allies following the death of his father due to a man-eating demon bear attack. This story is an epic that all culminates in the war of dogs versus bear. The premise is sick, the execution is also surprisingly great, but it also came out in the 80s and the art is not great, so I would understand if this is not your thing. Level E is about a grotesque alien that looks like a mixture between that old grandma SpongeBob was trying to sell chocolate to and a centipede. And it crash lands on Earth and decides to live there out of sheer boredom. It takes the form of blonde Jesus and has Gex with the baseball-brained main character. Okay, they don't have Gex. They're just really close. It's funny. It's episodic. But again, I'm completely okay with episodic shit if it's actually funny. Wait, this is made by Togashi? What? This was my biggest surprise of the video by far. This seemingly random alien gag series with barely an overarching plot was created by the same man who crafted the most legendary shonen works of all time, starting with Yu Yu Hakusho and then ending with Hunter x Hunter. So if you want to deep dive into this Legends catalog, this should be near the top of your list. I found it to be pretty enjoyable. City Hunters is about a group of contractors called the City Hunters that take up any job if it pays well, from cold-blooded assassinations to sweeping up scum on the streets. This anime honestly reminds me of your classical 80s action cartoon with the evil villains of the week and the big tough main character that always triumphs at the end of the episode. But this anime is more than that. The villains are more fleshed out, the characters are three-dimensional, and the action is really cool. It's just a solid old head show. Mashal is about a guy who was born with a bat and a gunfight. He lives in this high fantasy swords and sorcery world with no magic. At a time in history where literally everyone has some form of magic. He applies to a magic high school and punches his way to acceptance. I'm serious. This is a comedy which did make me burst out in laughter from time to time just because of the sheer absurdity of everything, but it wasn't as funny as some of the comedy shows higher up, so stay tuned for that. And keep in mind that comedy is always going to be subjective, so one thing to understand with this list is that the funny shit is going to have the most subjective rankings out of anything here, since if I didn't find something that's supposed to make me laugh funny, then I'm not gonna rank it high. And it'll pretty much be 100% enjoyment that I'm rating it on, because you can't really critique a comedy story. Beelzebub is about a cute ass baby who's apparently the demon lord's child who attaches himself to a good for nothing delinquent. Give this anime one episode and I guarantee you're gonna be laughing your ass off. This shit aged like a stone. 50 years later, that stone still give me a fucking stone. But of course, there will always be some changes, like how it depicts non-binary characters, for example. But otherwise, this was a really fun time. Beelzebub is adorable. He and Oba make for a funny ass duo, and all the other characters are great too. Hinomaru Sumo is about sumo wrestling, which was something I was never really interested until this show educated me. This shit makes boxing look like a sissy's game, because unlike a lot of similar sports out there, sumo wrestling has no weight class. So if you're getting the ring built like an African marathon runner, you're gonna get snapped in half by some 6'5", 300-pound titan. So our main character is an underdog specifically because he has a less than optimal build for the sport, but nonetheless he dreams of conquering high school sumo wrestling to climb to and ultimately reach the highest rank that a sumo wrestler can achieve: American. No, but seriously, I really enjoyed my time watching this as someone who's never given a fuck about sumo. All the characters are extremely likable and it's really just a fun time. They made a Dragon Quest anime and it's kind of fire. I never played any of the games and it kind of makes me want to. So if you're a Dragon Quest fan and are curious about this, the anime doesn't spoil the game and apparently the games don't spoil the anime. So it's pretty much just a disconnected story just taking place in the same setting. It's based on a manga that came out a while ago. And it works for the guy whose first time hearing about this franchise was in fucking Smash Bros. And it'll work for diehard fans all the same. This show proves that you could write a perfectly enjoyable story without some wildly subversive stunts or every villain being an anti-hero. Yes, it's basic, but that's pretty much its strength. It's just great popcorn shonen. Seraph of the End is a huge throwback that was created by the same studio that made Attack on Titan, and it seems to draw a lot of inspiration from it too. It got basically a copy and pasted Eren Yeager and Armin and Mikasa, and it's set in an apocalyptic world where these mysterious vampires spread a disease that kills off everyone above the age of 13. Although the similarities end here, this anime has admittedly a very gripping start. I honestly believed I was gonna be eating like extremely good with this first episode. That genuinely led me to believe we're getting something of Attack on Titan quality. The art is amazing, the music is incredible, and I don't want to spoil the first episode, but I thought they handled it the best that they possibly could. But as soon as episode 2 switched on, the cracks started to form. Somehow, through an ass pull of extraordinary magnitude, this supposed apocalyptic setting with a destitute populace and scarce circumstances became set in a fucking high school. It's honestly beyond my comprehension how so many of these anime authors feel this gravitational pull to always writing this way. There's also this guy who's just Zenitsu with less screen time and half volume. Overall, I never found a lot of the characters introduced after episode 1 to be all that interesting. Although surprisingly, the show pretty much changes gears every couple of episodes. It's pretty fast paced, so the high school shit never lasts very long. I'm not even a big hater of the show. I'm literally just saying that it's worse than Attack on Titan, which is true for like 95% of the shows on this list. Overall, it's above average. In a genre filled to the brim with underdogs, the Prince of Tennis sticks out because Ryoma is quite literally the opposite of an underdog. He's an overdog, I guess. No, but genuinely, to put this into perspective, this 12-year-old tennis player enters a tournament specifically for 16-year-old, and then he goes on to absolutely smoke the top-seeded player in a 0-5 set. Then the fucking commentator on the side goes on in a monologue, essentially about how this fucking kid was playing the entire game with his non-dominant hand. Although the show engages the audience through the fact that even though he's pretty much a prodigy, he's kind of still an underdog because of how young he is. There's always going to be limitations when you're playing a sport that has a lot to do with raw power and arm length. And it's sick to see Ryoma triumph over everything. This is just good sports anime. Although the only downside is that it looks very choppy and even old for its time. Like, this anime came out in 2001 and you're telling me you can't at least bring it up to like 360p? Like, I'm genuinely seeing like 20 pixels on my screen right now. Bakuman reminded me a lot of a sports anime. Two ordinary Joes dream for the top and they face many obstacles and clash heads with rivals on the way there. We're also educated on what they're trying to reach the top of, whether that be basketball, tennis, or manga. This anime, written by the same guy who made Death Note, by the way, was surprised to see that, is about these youngsters who dream of writing a popular Shonen Jump series, which was pretty much identical to Young Me, the only difference being actual down in basic literacy. And it's so interesting as a guy who's been watching anime for most of his life to see how manga is legitimately created from start to finish. Also, watching their journey and seeing them perfect their craft is not only incredibly entertaining, but also makes me appreciate the medium significantly more. It's truly an impressive feat that the only 2 series written by Obata are so great in their own respective ways. And it's a shame that he only created these 2 and nothing else. 2 things I know about Fist of the North Star. And also that there is a significant number of exploding heads in this anime. So naturally I was excited to get into it, and it's pretty great. The plot is reminiscent of a Mario type, where the main character Kenshiro has his lover stolen by his rival, but it's a Mario plot with a dark twist to it. Fist of the North Star is a post-apocalyptic epic, where Kenshiro travels through this dark wasteland filled with bloodthirsty ravengers. Most of all, the characters are burly stoic men with pecs of irons, cocks of steel, and manly logic. This is the shonen of all time, and it definitely deserves its place in the history books. It doesn't do anything I consider to be new today, but all the characters make it damn entertaining. Okay, I've been waiting this entire video to say the name of this anime. Yeah, is an absolutely fucking insane anime no matter how you look at it. It stars this tall, muscular, Afrocentric weirdo that fights a fascist government that is trying to steal everyone's hair. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he fights with his fucking nose hairs. He uses them like whips. This anime is so funny. All the characters are just unserious goofballs, and he fights with his fucking nose hairs. You gotta hop on this shit. You gotta do it. Just do it. Haku ni Go made me learn and care for a game that I've never even heard of. It's about this ancient Japanese instructor, Sai, that teaches the game Go to the shogun, and then after he dies, he possesses a Go board for 150 years until Hikaru finds it and gets possessed himself. And the 2 of them have a great chemistry, and they're really just enjoyable characters to watch on screen. Remember that insane debacle where that chess player was accused of cheating through the use of vibrating anal beads? This show is basically just that. Hikaru becomes a pro Go player through Sai just whispering every single move to him. The animation for this anime about Go is honestly top notch, all things considered. The characters are great and the plot was fun, and don't worry if you've never heard of Go either. They actually make an effort to explain it. Kuroko no Basket is basically the NBA but better. And also they're in fucking high school. This guy has the ability to never fucking miss a shot. This dude can copy the skills of other people. This other guy is just LeBron, and we don't talk about this guy. I watched this one as a kid and was fucking obsessed with it. I thought the concept of the generation of miracles was so fucking cool back then, and I can't even lie to you, I was rooting for Ayomi before I even knew who Kobe was. But basically a group of 6 middle schoolers who were all goats at basketball banded together in a supremely dominant team, later dubbed as the Generation of Miracles. But then when it came to graduate, they all split apart to different high schools. So now the story focuses on the secret 6 member who basically acted as the glue keeping the Generation of Miracles together, and his journey through challenging the other schools. So upon rewatch, Kuroko no Basket is a really fun watch, and there are certain scenes that just have my jaw on the floor with how stunning some of these sequences look. But I feel like most obviously towards the end, and also prevalent throughout the entire show, this series seems to be more focused on showing off the fucking anime ass superpowers that the anime gave his characters, instead of having the fundamentals of basketball being the component contributing to the wins. It's always the fact that this bitch has conqueror's hockey and you can't do shit against him. And one of the sports anime that I placed higher up in particular basically did this, but in a way that instead highlights the qualities of the sports rather than some bullshit anime mechanics. D. Greyman was one of the shows I was more excited to watch on the list. I've always heard about it and thought the character designs were cool, and I ended up enjoying it a lot. It definitely tackles darker themes that you don't see a lot in your conventional shonen. D. Greyman is about this menace called the Millennium Earl, who uses humanity's negative emotions to create Akuma, which are the main monsters that our main characters, who are exorcists, fight against. That Earl guy is basically just Patient Zero Muzan now that I think about it. So our main guy, Alan Walker, wait a second, I swear to God I know that name from somewhere. Holy shit, Alan Walker, Norwegian DJ and producer, most famous for his hit Faded, which has over 3 billion views on YouTube. I didn't know you got a gig as a shonen protagonist. No, but seriously, I think the best part of this anime is his characters. Alan's just a chill dude who wants to stop the guy planning the destruction of mankind. The sword guy is just a sword guy, that's all he needs to be. And then all the women in the show are not your stereotypical shonen woman, where 99% of the time they're just sex dolls or just stupid. And I'm no misogynist, but they're literally just written stupid. So if you've ever seen D. Gray Man, I'd give it a shot. It actually aged pretty well. The anime is over 15 years old now. Naruto was one of the first animes I've ever watched. And no matter which way you look at it, it has a fantastic start. Immediately the first couple arcs we are eating good. Zabuza, Chunin exam, Sasuke betrayal. Any haters of Naruto, I hope your issues with the show appear later on, because there's a reason this show is so stupidly influential. It was the first to really execute on the underdog trope perfectly. Naruto was someone who you couldn't help but root for. A bullied weakling who is also a vessel for a demon, is set up for a tragic tale, but despite all of this, Naruto has this innocent optimism where he dreams for the top. And his dynamic with the main cast of characters, especially Sasuke, is very well thought out, with Sasuke representing raw talent, strong genes, and unspoken riz, all things that Naruto completely lack. And then there's Sakura. So Shippuden is where some of the problems start to arise, where the thing that made Naruto an underdog, the Nine Tails, just become cheat codes that make him practically omnipotent. And I'm not the first one to point this out, but every character in the show that happens to be a female has completely shit writing and immediately becomes irrelevant. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was my GOAT, Rock Lee, becoming some random background NPC just because he didn't fucking power skill to the goofy ass state that Naruto was in. And that's actually a way bigger issue than just Rock Lee, since all the side characters got sidelined. And you might respond with, well yeah, that's because they're side characters. But by being sidelined, I mean that they literally were displaced, since their influence in power levels compared to everyone else is just infinitesimal. The scaling gets wacky and stupid, like 80,000 ninjas fighting in the war, are you serious? And the characters just start dying and getting rezzed at the end. The end of Shippuden is really not the best at all. The only redeeming thing about it is Madara, really. Otherwise, Naruto was kind of ruined a lot by later arcs. Tokyo Revengers is unrealistic. And obviously I'm not stupid, of course time travel isn't realistic. I'm specifically talking about the gang warfare. If you don't know, in Tokyo Revengers, our main hero and protagonist, Takebichi, who canonically has the same condition as Deku where he's compelled to conduct the waterworks for half the show, gets transported back in time to his youth when he is part of a gang. And he uses his knowledge of the future to affect the tragedy-filled past. And I pretty much love everything that this show accomplishes, with some of the best executed time travel mechanics and plot in the medium. And respectively, a very interesting depiction of Japanese gangs. I was surprised to see how these young presenting thugs are literally waging war against each other and in some cases fucking killing people. And then I found out that every character in this anime is in fucking middle school. These children are riding on motorcycles, pulling knives on each other, killing niggas, and they have to make it back to home before curfew to study for their pre-algebra quiz for the next day. Where are these kids' parents? They're fucking 13 years old talking about how the streets are for me. Like, bitch, you probably have 4,000 hours on Fortnite. And I know this might seem like a silly nitpick that I'm overblowing, but this literally has such a negative effect on my immersion of the show that it bumps it way lower than it should be. I do like this show. I even read ahead in the manga a couple years ago, and it has a strong plot, but shit like this is what throws me off. It seems like nobody talks about Dr. Stone anymore. This show really takes me back. So I rewatched a lot of season 1 of this show and I enjoyed myself the whole way through. It's about a wannabe high school Einstein who lives in his school's chemistry lab, and then his black-headed friend who has less brain and more brawn. Then suddenly every single person on Earth gets turned to stone, and Senku and Taiju are the only ones to wake up after an unthinkable amount of time passes. This show hits on its premise, hits on its execution, and hits on just keeping my undivided attention for the whole way through. I even went on to watch the second season, which maintains that same quality. I always appreciate when shows are able to capture everyone's attention without conforming to the generic bread and butter tropes. Like, there ain't no power-ups in this show or any of those bells and and whistles. The power scaling in this anime is going from 7th grade science to 8th grade science. They genuinely made the sciences something I don't sleep through, and that's a massive accomplishment that should be given the recognition it deserves. Kaiju number 8 was the big anime last season for good reason. It's one of those hybrid shonen where a main dude gets transformed into a half-breed of the kaiju he's fighting. And I think the reason, or at least one of the reasons so much people gravitated towards this show is the fact that this is the main character. An old dude of undeniable unk status. For one time, in a genre of like over 400 shows, the protagonist isn't a kid or in high school. You seriously don't know how refreshing it is to see how Unk takes up a whole new perspective on the genre. He's just also a pleasant guy to watch on screen, and a guy who still dreams despite his age. And even after getting his kaiju power, Unk never abuses it and gets into the kaiju defense force fair and square. Although his kaiju powers are kind of a liability because if he were to get found out, he'd get sniped. So a lot of the show is about him navigating the fucking unit meant to take out kaiju while also being a kaiju. So when he's actually forced to transform, it's a big deal. Hell's Paradise has one of the most mysterious and eerie vibes, one of the coolest worlds and characters, and it also has some sick villains. At least in the manga, all of this is true. Listen, I'm not saying that they royally fucked up the anime adaptation, I'm just saying that they didn't really capture what I thought made this series really special. I don't know how to really put this into words, but this adaptation feels kind of bland. I think maybe part of it has to do with the pacing of the show. The manga's pacing was phenomenal. It was quite fast paced and it still had time to flesh out every character incredibly well. But I feel like the anime somehow accomplished being slower paced and also cutting out some important details at the same time. It's weird to me, but that's how it felt. I'd 100% recommend the manga for this. It's about a collection of prisoners who have received the death sentence, but they are given the choice by the shogun to explore a mysterious island to acquire the elixir of immortality for a pardon from their execution. And the island is so fucking cool. Literally just read it, please. You gotta, I'm begging you. Americans, please stand up and salute in honor of this patriotic, rights-having, red-blooded Japanese cartoon. Because this anime is portraying a real man's sport. None of that pussyfooting they do with the soccer ball or jumping and dribbling like them jungle monkeys do in basketball. You gotta be out of your cotton picking mind if you're playing those un-American sports. Because football, the real football, is all you need. And our Shield 21 is here to tend to that need. It really seems weird that American football was relevant enough in Japan for someone to make a whole ass show about it. But it is relevant in Japan, to my surprise. And the show is fire. It's about this scrawny little high schooler that my initial impression was that he was going to be annoying as hell the whole series, but he actually becomes a more interesting character later on. He's so used to be taken advantage of and running other people's chores for them that he naturally becomes an incredibly fast runner. And when the American football team recruiters found out about his swiftness, first of all, they recruited him as a running back immediately, but they also found his ability so groundbreaking that whenever they have games, they make him cover up his face so that other recruiters wouldn't steal him away to other teams. And eventually this masked running back became known as the iShield 21. And that's not even a joke, that's true. Overall, the plot is nothing special to sports anime subgenre. Team has a dream, team must defeat rival teams, team must work together, team must train, and then team must win. Its plot is not special, but at the end of the day, it executes on it very well, and I absolutely adore all the characters. Skit Dance is just Gintama set in high school. Every single joke in Skit is easily something I can see Gintama using. It's about this club called Skit that handles odd jobs around the school. I think it's just as funny, if not funnier than Gintama at times, but I think the only thing holding the series back comedically is the main character. He's a normal guy surrounded by goofy, absurd comics, when I think I prefer Gintama's approach where Jintoki, the main character, is the fucking goofball himself, along with everyone else in the cast. So it's funny. I guarantee you that you'll get a good laugh from it. Gintama, for me, is just gambling. I could stake all of my dopamine that this episode will make me laugh and hit the jackpot with me actually dying on the floor laughing, or I could bet half of my brain cells and lose all of them because my face throughout the entire episode is unintentionally this stoic statue that never flinched. I naturally had high expectations, looking at all the high accolades and praise this series has always been given. I was fully ready to start sniffing my own farts while talking about this show in S tier, but that's not the timeline we're living in right now. This show probably has some of the most subjective and weird comedy I've ever seen. And all of that subjective comedy is intentional because so much of this show is just absurd references to other manga at the time. So for context, Gintama is a manga that was published in 2003, so it referenced other Shonen Jump manga from 2003. And look, I was a 2000s kid, but by 2003, I couldn't even think. So obviously, most of those jokes flew directly over my head. And obviously, this show is a comedy. So if I spend an entire episode not laughing, I'm not enjoying myself. Oh, I should probably explain the premise. So Gintama is set in the Edo period of Japan after it got invaded by aliens. So now samurai are an oppressed group who have lost their honor. And Jintoki is a samurai that totally still retains his honor. Instead of just rotting on the first season, I decided to peep at the second season since it definitely have more dated references, and it was definitely a step up, but it was still so hit or miss with the jokes, at least for me, that I can't place this any higher really. I totally understand if anyone makes this top tier, but for me, the best comedy anime has yet to come. If you turn on your TV, you might see cooking programs like Hell's Kitchen or Chopped or MasterChef. I don't know, I don't really watch cable anymore. But if you're in Japan, you might see something like this. Well, maybe you'd see this like 10 years ago, because Food Wars was pretty big back then. Genuinely one of the most out-of-the-box manga published in Shonen Jump. It's about fucking cooking, and they somehow made it to be one of the most entertaining series this genre has to offer. Like, you could always leave it to these fucking Shonen Jump authors to take a topic like cooking and somehow blend it with the underdog power fantasy tropes. But surprisingly, this shit actually works. And I always love when shows that cover an unconventional topic educate the viewer on shit that isn't common knowledge, while simultaneously weaving those explanations into the world building. The fan service is a lot, but to be completely honest, I find this shit pretty funny and honestly pretty relatable too. Like, sometimes food do be tasting so good that all your clothes start flying off and everyone's ass, titties, and cocks and balls start flopping out. Undead Unluck starts out with the main character with his cock and balls out, groping the female lead, and then he gets decapitated by a high-speed oncoming train. This show is one of the newer Shonen Jump manga that also got an anime adaptation. It's about a guy named Andy who has infinite regenerative powers, and Fuko, who is cursed with the ability to transfer her bad luck to any person she touches. This obviously psychotic duo makes for situations where the best course of action would literally be suicide bombing the villain with a meteor crash fueled by Fuko charging Andy with all her unluck, then dipping. And then since Andy can survive anything, he's pretty chill with just getting ass blasted by a comet if it means taking out his ops. This combination, as you can probably imagine, leads to some sick fights that you can never predict. Also on that topic, the power system is really interesting in this anime. This anime exists in a world where every once in a while a supernatural individual will be birthed called a negator. And their powers are founded upon a specific word that they, well, negate. For example, Unchange is a power that belongs to a person that can suspend an individual or an object's tendency to change. Untruth compels someone to do exactly the opposite of what they're trying to do, and Unstoppable belongs to someone that can't be stopped. It seems complicated, and yeah, I get it. Sometimes it's to the point where I'm watching with absolutely no idea what the fuck just happened, and then 5 minutes later my brain finally makes the connection that the unexceptional negator combined his power with the unemployed negator to bankrupt and therefore defeat Unbroke. But trust me, it becomes intuitive once you get engrossed into the story, and I feel like the anime never really showcased where this power really shines. I've read ahead in the manga to the end of the All Seasons arc for anyone who's read this before, and I could say for sure that this shit keeps getting better and better. Would recommend if you've already seen everything in the higher tiers. Dragon Ball. Well, I think this is fair placement, but I'm probably still gonna get eaten alive for this anyways. I didn't grow up with Dragon Ball as much as other shows out there. I'd catch a few episodes in random order on TV, but that's about it. That is to say, I don't have this really intense nostalgic factor when it comes to the show. I mean, I like it and I recognize it as one of the most influential and important anime to ever release, but I think the shows above it just have more to offer. But I did revisit Dragon Ball for a little bit to see how it lives up today, and I'll tell you my experience. And by the way, I watched Dragon Ball Kai because I heard it was supposed to remove a lot of the filler and drawn out fights. And I had a pretty fun time with the show. They had some absolutely valid cuts to filler like Snake Way and Garlic Jr. And the fights are pretty tolerable, except for a couple. So my problem comes down to the meat of the show. Listen, I love Kakarot, Vegeta, Piccolo, and all of them. They're charming characters, but it seems like the only thing the author or the characters or even the very plot itself cares about are the fights.
When the fights actually happen, they're hype as shit, and the stories told within these fights are always gripping. But that doesn't excuse the entirety of the show's runtime revolving around just these fights. They tried it in the God of High School, and that fucking sucked dick. And to me, DBZ is exponentially better than God of High School, but it suffers from the same problem. It's just fights with no overarching substance or themes presented. Fun fact about Haikyuu is that 50% of the show is filled with comedy skits and jokes, and this is how much I actually laughed at it. It's either, oh, funny face, or oh, look at this goofy reaction this character had, or oh, look at this other funny face. Okay, I know, comedy is subjective and all that. No shade if you actually enjoy this. But my problem is that it takes up so much of the show to the point where it feels like genuine filler. But now that that's out of the way, Haikyuu is one of the most gripping underdog sports anime out there, where the team that the main character plays on loses a lot. But we also see how these losses affect our main cast, as they always learn from their mistakes, and it's satisfying to watch them all pick themselves back up. The main character, Hinata, is the perfect balance between Asta and Naruto, where he doesn't want to make me blow my brains out, and he also doesn't feel like a formulaic ripoff of the show that perfected the underdog archetype in the genre. He's just a likable kid with a dream who you can't help but root for. Also, I played volleyball in like gym class and shit, but I never really took it seriously, nor have I ever watched pro volleyball. That all changed when I picked up Haikyuu. Immediately after getting hooked on this anime, I became an authoritarian dictator in my gym class, assigning positions deliberately to min-max our 4-step approach so our 1-2-2 coverage becomes iron tight and we ace the opposing team until they reach a goofy breakpoint. And by the way, I'm not making any of these terms up. This is real volleyball jargon, although I'm 100% not using them correctly. Spy X Family has a Sigma male as a protagonist. Alright, hear me out. He fakes his identity as a lone wolf, creates a fake family to further his mysterious agenda, and literally spies on governments for a living. Spy Family is about a spy, a telepath, and an assassin who create a fake family with each other for their own reasons, but none of them have knowledge about the other family's real identities. Shit's funny as fuck, it has some amazing action, and it's also a nice comfort show to just put on. It really just has everything. Genuinely one of the shows that you could literally recommend to anyone, and they'd be able to find some type of enjoyment of it. Demon Slayer is a banana. You'll probably have a difficult time finding someone who actively dislikes bananas, but you'll probably have an even harder time finding people who think it's the best thing they've ever consumed. Demon Slayer is the definition of popcorn shonen. You put it on, turn your brain off, look at the pretty colors, and not think about the show at all after finishing it. Tanjiro is a very safe but also very likable protagonist. Inosuke is the room temperature IQ part of the main cast that adds a nice boorish comedy relief, and Nezuko was scientifically manufactured to make anime fans go, aww. The main cast is a decently enjoyable collection of characters that really made the show a comfortable watch. The plot, on the other hand, wait a second. I have a feeling that I missed something. Maybe a suppressed memory or some sort of traumatic event? Zenitsu is that traumatic event. It's bewildering how you intentionally write a character that's so fucking useless and whiny that he's only relevant when he's unconscious. Zenitsu is the most blatantly annoying character I've ever had the dissatisfaction of seeing on screen. The author probably gave himself a migraine with this character and realized how fucking obnoxious and loud he is all the time halfway through writing the story, so he bullshitted in a character quirk that made him sleep for a long time so the audience wouldn't unalive themselves. Okay, rant over. Fuck this character. The plot is serviceable, and Muzan is a pretty chill villain. Demon Slayer is the shonen of all time. Is what I'd say if not for the beautiful animation of Ufotable. And I hear a lot of critics saying stuff like animation doesn't affect my enjoyment of shows, but I feel like it's easy to say that when you got animation at this level instead of at this level. If Demon Slayer got a shit adaptation and slideshow animation, nobody would watch it. Because we don't like looking at ugly things, that's just a fact. So when judging the quality of shows, I don't think factoring in animation just a little bit is a bad thing. In Demon Slayer's case especially, my enjoyment factor absolutely carries the show to this placement. I nutted watching Mugen Train, I nutted watching season 2, I nutted watching season 3, and we don't mention the Hashira training, except for like the last episode. When looking at more objective metrics, one thing I'd point out is that the characters in this show are typically just given a singular trait and then that's their whole personality. It's an incredibly lazy way to characterize, and overall the show is not that deep when it comes to themes. Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it's a damn good wheel. Season 1 is pretty much just a slightly above average battle shonen with a potentially Nine-Tails Fox Naruto situation with Itadori, but where the series truly reaches its peak is Season 2, which has, wait a fucking second. Is this kid really glazing a show that he literally spent almost 30 minutes trying to persuade everyone that is mid? Yes, I am. Okay, there's a reason. Trust. This video showcased that most of my grievances I have with the show are tied to arcs not adapted yet in the anime. I think the series starts out pretty good, but eventually I think all of the potential and setup that the earlier events prepared were ultimately wasted because of poor execution and concepts. Although I'm just judging seasons 1 and 2 here of the anime. It honestly shocked me how different season 2's approach to everything was. Hidden Inventory is hands down the best arc. Shibuya Instant is hype and it had pretty great ideas, but its execution felt a little sloppy for reasons I detailed in the video. Although taking into account my indifference towards the low-key average for a season and some flaws in season 2, JJK culminates into a pretty solid new gen shonen that I think practically anyone can enjoy. Guys, guess what? We are officially at top tier. Yes, sir, type shit.
Blue Lock was my favorite sports anime. Well, before I had to start watching a certain series for this video. But the show led me through a journey of not giving a fuck about the World Cup a couple years ago to becoming a scholar about how this intricate yet simple ball game is played on the world stage. I stopped calling it soccer and started calling it by its real name, the British Piggy Bank. But it's your normal shonen sports anime with the added power scaling mechanics of anime. Although the special thing about Blue Lock that I noticed off rip was how fucking dramatic everything was. Like, one character the entire game would try to master a specific technique, and then he finally pulls off the flip musty reset flick. Then Isagi at the other corner of the field would just be pondering. His 3 trillion brain cells start firing off on all cylinders, so much so that his corporeal form ceases to exist and he deconstructs his presence into puzzle pieces. Then, as he takes into account all the socioeconomic repercussions of him hitting the musty flip reset, he reconstructs himself and he knows what to do, which is like guard the guy or some obvious shit like that. Obviously, I'm just playing around, it's never that bad, but somehow through sheer budget or maybe just good writing, this show never felt cringe to me with how much they be exaggerating stuff. Even if it may be artificially raising stakes by Isagi overthinking the extra pubic hair on his opponent, it never feels contrived. Somehow. I'm not even actually sure how they did it. This is literally a formula for something I'd hate, but I ended up loving it. I will always adore shows where people that have no knowledge of the sport they're playing can easily get into it. The animation is stunning. I mean, you don't get better than this when it comes to sport anime. The only thing I always nitpick with this show that I just do because it's fucking funny is how they have these intense action scenes that you could visually see how much time and care was put into every frame. And then the next frame we cut to would be like the most disgraceful Blender CGI, bruh. Assassination Classroom has a batshit insane premise and executes on it really well. It's about this classroom of students that are tasked with assassinating their teacher by the Japanese government, which is crazy to me because no one would have to tell me to assassinate my junior year English teacher. But it ultimately ends up looking like this grotesque yellow creature who looks like a runway model compared to my English teacher, but to everyone else they're understandably pretty scared. Like, if the government itself can't handle this menace, that poses a ton of unanswered questions, like what type of monstrosity even is he, or why does this thing even want to teach us, or is this a hentai? These all plague the minds of these kids, but they soon learn that this thing actually wants to be a good teacher, and eventually sentiments change within the classroom. And I really love how they handled everything towards the end. Like, seriously, I consider Assassination Classroom to be a modern classic that everyone should watch. The Promised Netherland is a show that had one of my favorite first episodes in anime. The fact that this was published in fucking Shonen Jump speaks to how blurred the lines are for this genre. I'd say mystery, thriller, low fantasy, but not shonen. I'd be surprised if anyone watching this hasn't seen Promised Neverland. It's an absolute goat that has a sick premise and brilliantly executes on it for a solid run of 12 episodes. Unfortunately, we've never gotten a season 2, and furthermore, the studio behind this anime actually expressed their hatred for this show and vowed to never continue the adaptation again. That was the good timeline.
Unlucky for us, we live in this timeline where season 2 exists, and it's probably the single worst sequel I've ever witnessed. Entire arcs were just deleted from the main plotline. Characters that were pivotal in the manga for certain reasons are just missing in action, and the pacing is so fast that plot holes and illogical character decisions are extremely frequent. And it all culminates into just a weird ending that had absolutely nothing leading up to it in no way. So respectfully, to pay homage to all the Promised Neverland fans out there, I bashed my head against the wall so I can amnesia my way out for getting this abomination. And I'm ranking it like season 2 doesn't exist because this shit is just outrageous. Psyche K is my favorite comedy anime out there. So Psyche is this stupidly overpowered psychic that can genuinely change the mass of the proton without lifting a finger. But unlike the normal progression of a story like this where the main character hides his godlike omnipotent powers in order to reveal it at some sort of magic academy to impress all of his future harem members, Psyche wants nothing to do with any of that. His outlandish goal in classic shonen fashion is just to be ordinary, a side character. But he finds himself attracting a ton of room temperature IQ NPCs that always end up forcing Psyche's hand. It's just the funniest thing in the world to see how the nature of some characters mixed with the intense refined idiocy from some other characters always end up in a situation where Psyche has to do his job as the protagonist. This show is sheer genius. To Your Eternity was one of those shows to me that was really hard to write about, because how do I communicate that a show is just beautiful? It's technically a supernatural drama, but it's way more than that. It has some great action, but the show is just way more than just action. It delves into this unfamiliar world as we follow the journey of an empty shell, as it learns the qualities of being human from scratch. And that's really all this show is. It's about learning what humans are all about, from the lowest lows to the highest highs. I really didn't expect to connect with this show on such a deep level, but I think that's just a testament to how good the writing of this show is, and how masterfully every single character was handled. I'd seriously recommend this to anyone if you haven't seen it. Please get on this. Before even saying anything, I just want to say that I don't like boxing. The whole concept of the sport doesn't seem like much of a sport to me. You're just beating the shit out of some dude until they drop. And this is coming from the dude who used to dedicate himself to track and field, which is literally just a sport where you run. So it's really insane to me how Hajime no Ippo shattered the image of what boxing actually is to me. It follows our main guy, Ippo, on his journey to becoming a professional boxer. And you might see this old art style and say, no thanks, but look here. You see the studio behind this? It's the One Punch Man guys, the Free Ring guys, the Death Note guys, the fucking Hunter x Hunter guys. You can trust that you'll be eating good animation wise, regardless of art style. And oh no, another red flag. They're trying to crack jokes in this show? What the fuck? Is this gonna be a repeat of Haikyuu? No, it isn't. This show actually made me laugh quite a few times, and I feel like a lot of it is just because of the fact that Ippo is such a likable and charming dude that's surrounded by likable and charming dudes. His matches are always tense because we're seriously always rooting for the guy, but we're also always given perfect stakes on what's to come with Ippo's opponents. I seriously don't know what to say, just watch the show. Bleach was my first anime ever. And I feel like with a lot of valid things that you could say against this anime, there's also a flip side to it. Like sure, at times Waco Mundo was a little drawn out and also a little copy and paste from Soul Society, where it features Ichigo and gang invading a foreign land and tackling the ranks of this newly discovered society. But there's also the flip side where the anime, at least, just out of nowhere pulls up with a Spanish guitar and just starts shredding that shit on top of fight scenes. The Bleach soundtrack is one of the most memorable and unique in anime as a whole. I mean, obviously, it's Shiro Sagetsu, same person that crafted legendary OST of Evangelion. It was bound to be a banger. Also in Waco Mundo, we get introduced to literally the coolest character designs that we've ever seen Kubo draw, and some of the best fights. By the way, I was focusing on Waco Mundo because apparently a lot of people hate it. But looking elsewhere, Soul Society is truly a masterclass of shonen writing at the time, and still today. I think what makes Soul Society so great is just the novelty of it all. Ichigo and friends start out in the first 15 episodes or so inside of this tiny human town, and the concept concept of Soul Reapers in Zanpakuto are spoon-fed to the gang. But then, abruptly, they're forced to engage with this society that they know nothing about with no information on anything, and instead of being spoon-fed about these supernatural systems at play, nobody is there to guide them at all. I think the reason why this arc speaks to so many people, because it may or may not be allegorical to teenagers on their journey transitioning to adulthood, and how we are thrusted into this society we know nothing about. There's also the fact that the power system is sick, and Ichigo is actually a really cool main character that makes this show just a great watch. Oh, and also the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is doing its thing, and it's honestly just good shonen. Nothing more to say. Thank the Lord to God, good adaptation. Yu Yu Hakusho is a series that to me is defined by its peaks. You got the Dark Tournament arc, which is basically the grandfather of the modern shonen tournament arc, and then the fights are seriously some of the best in the business. Like, this absolute demon Togashi knows how to just write the most gripping and engaging fights. Like, out of my top 5 favorite fights from anime, 3 of them come from Togashi, like genuinely. Although upon rewatch, I think that there are a lot of slow, fillerish type of stretches of episodes, but they're not even real filler because they're canon to the manga. That's mostly towards the beginning of the show though. Maybe it was the case that Togashi wasn't certain on where exactly he wanted to take the story, so he fucked around and found out for the first couple of chapters. And it doesn't kill the show or anything, it's still thoroughly enjoyable. It's probably my favorite shonen from this era, and I will say that Yusuke is my close second favorite shonen protagonist in general. I just love everything the show does with him, and his personality is so entertaining to watch. The show also has a sick cast of side characters too. When I'm in a dick sucking contest and my opponent is a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan, what do you think of this meme? Listen, I've known JoJo fans in real life, online too, and I will say one thing: they are strange. So because of these memes and my experience, I've always been hesitant to actually get into the show, but I ended up getting into it a few years back, and I deeply apologize to all the manga readers out there. I haven't read it, and I know Steel Ball is like the only thing y'all talk about, and it sounds amazing, don't get me wrong. I've been meaning to get into it, but this list only covers anime-only events. But talking about JoJo's overall, it's just one of the funnest battle shonen out there. It's genuinely impossible to just not have a good time watching this. It has my second favorite power system in the genre, with stands providing for some of the most dynamic and interesting fights to watch, and all of the characters are just absolutely priceless to watch on screen. Like, seriously, there's not one character from any of these parts from the main cast that I think are weak. Actually, let me do a little ranking inside the ranking, because I want to see if all of my takes on all of the arcs of JoJo's are controversial. So my least favorite is the first part. Not much to say here. I don't really think this is too controversial to say. The only good thing about this part is that Dio is introduced. Otherwise, Jonathan, I think, is kind of just a boring main character compared to the rest of the Joestars, in my opinion. The second to worst goes to part 3. Okay, honestly, there's a massive jump in enjoyment between part 1 and 3, and the rest of the parts are extremely close to me. But part 3, I think, suffered the most to me from its pacing, where I feel like this was one of the most dragged out shonen sagas I've sat through. But Jotaro's cool as fuck. I find it funny that this bitch is built like an Armstrong looking ass still in high school. I mean, you don't get more manly than that. And bro's still like a teenager too, so that's crazy. Dio is doing his thing. I think we see peak Dio in this arc. He makes donuts for a living. Also, this is where the stands are introduced, and while it is the first part to implement this genius system, I think its predecessors do a better job in highlighting its strength. And as much as I have issues with this part, I'll have to admit that the last fight between Dio and Jotaro easily solos everything to come before and after. So next up, we got part 2. It's just so fucking fun. Joseph is one of my favorite Joestars. He's fucking cool. He don't need no stands to carry him to victory. He mastered the obsolete power system, whatever it's called, Hammond, and then he got a plane somehow. Kind of forgot how that happened. And he was just a menace in general. Part 6 is next, and honestly, I had to go back and finish this part, because I swear to God, this got dealt some life-ending backshots by Netflix and its fucking abominable release schedule. It single-handedly killed all the hype and motivation for anyone to finish it. They dropped 12 episodes of this part a couple years back in a single day. We all binged it in that same day, and then Netflix is just like, okay, see you in like 6 months. Listen, I hate weekly releases just as much as the next guy, but it's like an empirical fact that weekly releases preserve the hype and talk about a show. Like, I'm genuinely curious about how many people finish this part if you're an anime only. And it stings even more because this arc is really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Jolene is a sick protagonist, the fights were all great, and I like the general plot a lot.
Next we got part 5, which has the objective greatest main and supporting cast of all of JoJo's. Bucciarati, Narancia, Abacchio, Mista, they're all masterfully written characters who all have great arcs and backstories. They're also just fucking fun to watch on screen and interact with each other. Giorno has the coolest powers of any Joestar out there and the best theme. I fuck with Diablo and his powers hard, like he's absolutely my second favorite villain in the show, but nobody can overtake the king. The entire plot just never let my attention wander. But by far the best part of this arc are its characters, in my opinion. Part 4 is my favorite of the anime so far, and I like it because unlike part 3, which sees the main guys literally traveling across the world in order to slay a greater world-threatening evil, it takes place in this small-scale town where the stakes are lowered instead of heightened. I personally love the dedication by Araki, and it plays out perfectly. He introduces one of my favorite villains in Shonen, who matches the minimum required freak to be considered a JoJo's fan. This part is so unique in the genre. I absolutely love the murder mystery Shonen shit, and will absolutely kill for more shows like this. Okay, so that's my ranking and reasoning behind JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And the real question is that now that I've ranked this show so high, do I like it up the ass? And for those who are curious, I'll put you through to my girlfriend of 2 years. She'll tell you only on weekends. You guys might already know what's to come. There's only a couple shows left. It's just a matter of what order it's gonna be in. So stay with me as I talk about some real shit in this genre. Death Note is something that at first I thought would be questionable to include in a shonen video, because while it was published in Weekly Shonen Jump, this is so unlike any other show on this list. With the other protagonists in this genre, they're like, I'm gonna become the Wizard King, and then Light is just like,
No, you're not a gamer. No. You are not a gamer. I am so sick of all these people who think they're gamers. No, you're not. All right, and most of you are not even close to being gamers. I see these people saying, I put well over 100 hours in this game and it's great. That's nothing.
Although now I completely understand that this show is as shonen as any other anime in this list. Light Yagami is the ultimate version of what that edgy 14-year-old thinks he acts and looks like. So this absolutely earns the title of 4 boys. So Death Note is probably one of the most classic and influential pieces of television in the medium. It's genuinely the anime that gets people into anime. Not because it's some type of normie show with a safe execution. Death Note is known for having one of the most batshit insane premises, but also having absolutely stellar writing and one of the most memorable soundtracks to round it out. But everyone knows when it starts to go downhill. Episode 25. Now you may not know this episode just from the number, but it's like, remember that event in Fortnite? That event where the entire map got sucked into a black hole and people genuinely went into mourning like a close relative just passed away because fucking Fortnite was down for a day. You know what I find the most funny about that shit? The fact that fucking Fortnite streamers back then, they even take this opportunity to play other games. They just fucking stream the black hole for like 48 hours. But I digress. My point is that playing Fortnite in 2018 is just like Death Note before episode 25. And then me staring at that black hole for hours on end was just like me watching Death Note after this episode. That void was created after L dies, of course. He proved to have just too much presence in the show to just kill off. Everything that he was built up to, all the mind games, his seemingly real friendship with Light, L was robbed. He should have reached the end of his character arc at the end of the show, but instead the show deletes the main opposing force halfway through and awkwardly tries to shove in new characters to fill that void. But it's too abrupt, and none of Nier and his lackeys carry a fraction of the intrigue that came from Light and L's rivalry. If episode 25 never happened, you'd see this show higher up than it already is. The King of Shonen. The longest, most successful serialized manga ever. One Piece. We finally made it, One Piece fans. The undisputed GOAT. The completely uncontroversial greatest story ever told. There is definitely no argument to make against the show in the slightest, and everyone who hates it is just a brain dead orangutan. Okay, look. I was there for the peaks, and believe me, I know there are a lot of peaks. Although I think what the One Piece community always forgets is the fact that there are as many lows as peaks. And I know you might say that it's arrogant to call it a fact, but how about you look me in the eyes and defend to me the fucking Fishman Island arc, where a major plot defining event was Sanji sniffing a mermaid and getting a nosebleed of such legendary proportions that it incapacitates him for half of the arc. It's impossible to defend it. How about the Davy back fight, where I literally skipped because I thought it was filler, but had to go back and crawl through it because somehow it's canon. The only thing keeping me going was Luffy's afro. And then finally, there is the entirety of the almost 50 episodes of Skypiea, which was just the worst. One Piece has a lot to love. A lot of people look at Marineford, which is amazing, by the way, but that's not the extent of it in the slightest. There's Water 7, Sabaody, Enies Lobby, and I'm currently in the 3rd act of Wano right now, and I'm loving it. Believe me, this show has literally been with me for half of my entire life on this planet, and I'll be the first online to suck Oda's cock. But One Piece is not the best shonen. It's simply too flawed. For every Doflamingo this show has, there's a Hody Jones. To call yourself the best in a genre filled with such large and influential names, you have to be perfect, or at least close to perfect. Okay, this next one coming up is probably the one series I was the most excited to get into for this entire list. Why, you ask? Well, I could tell you about the absolutely impeccable reputation it has in its fan base, or its infamy for being the pinnacle of a certain subgenre. But I just want to show you the art, the attention to detail, the action that is drawn so fluidly that movement on this still image feels animated. It's slam dunk. And if you're curious, the reason I was so hyped for this because it's penned by the living, breathing god himself, Takehiko Inoue, the same deity responsible for Vagabond. So Slam Dunk is a basketball manga, and I was seriously overjoyed that this had an anime adaptation so I could put it on this list. But that's it. There's simply no chance I'm giving up the opportunity to read Peak to watch the fucking Slam Dunk anime. Who do you think I am? I don't even need to watch it to know that it doesn't capture the same artistic and narrative genius of Inoue. So what makes this the king of sports anime? Well, the answer is not actually very apparent in the first 20 chapters or so. That a lot of people, including myself, consider to be incredibly slow because Inoue wrote this in the 90s while trying to appeal to a Japanese audience. So understandably, he felt the need to really start at square one to explain the basics of the basics. As an American with a skin tone about the same color as charcoal, I was practically birthed with the modern basketball culture and rules burned into my mind. So when Inoue introduced the protagonist of a supposed basketball manga and he doesn't know what dribbling a ball is, I thought I was in for a very tedious read. But much to my surprise, most of Inoue's controversial decisions in this manga end up making me enjoy it that much more. So take for instance Sakuragi. He's never played or even seen a basketball game be played. The only reason he joins in the first place is because of a girl he likes, and looking from the outside, this kind of setup seems really miscalculated. There's a reason that virtually every sports anime has an ultra motivated seasoned athlete to star in the show. It simply just complements this style of show the most, since if the protagonist doesn't care about the game, then how would we, the audience, find it in us to give a shit about anything that's going on? But what I think I learned to appreciate is how when Sakuragi grows to love the sport, we as the audience see that childlike wonder in his eyes and grow to love it as well. Obviously I liked basketball before Slam Dunk, but it's like a rekindled flame, you know? And since we're on the track of making comparisons to other sports anime, I want to point out something that I really only noticed after reading Slam Dunk. I don't care about Isagi, I don't care about Kuroko or Ayomi or Kisei, and I don't care about any of the characters in Haikyuu off the court. For all of these examples, while they're locked in and playing whatever sport, they're always mad interesting to watch, but immediately outside of the court or the field, we're reminded that these characters are seriously just personalityless husks a lot of the times, that the author stuffed with some type of gimmick on the court and expected them to walk on their own 2 feet while having interactions that aren't about sports. Like, yeah, sure, Bachira has a monster coming inside of him, but what does that actually mean for his character? It means a string of backstories that I'm really not a fan of. So finally getting back to my point, the characters in Slam Dunk are actually just people I care about, not just athletes I care about, with interesting personalities that are seamlessly weaved into the playstyle of every character. I went to this read thinking I'd first be captivated by the Godsend art, but it ended up being the characters. Just saying, I haven't finished it. I'm about 120 chapters in, so try not to spoil it in the comments. For people that want to get into it but are hesitant to because of the start, I'd say just do a speed read for the first 20 chapters or so. Then I really start to love the series by literally the first game, which is about like chapter 25, I think. Chainsaw Man is a show I absolutely cheated on when making this list. So when I first drew up the psychopathic idea for this video, as you know, I intended to only take into account the animes of the show because I didn't want every single comment to just be like, oh, why is blank ranked like that? If you illiterate cotton picking ass could read, you'd place it first because everyone knows the manga's better. Although I literally could not bear it with Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man was fucked by the anime, and not because of a lot of reasons that people online think. Yeah, sure, the anime never really came close to capturing the stylized, almost psychedelic artwork of Fujimoto, and the CG is a little jarring at points. Although I think the real thing that killed this show is the fact that it only got 12 episodes. I will never come to understand this shit. Part 1 of Chainsaw Man was literally the perfect length for a clean 24 episode season 1 that just completely finishes part 1 and sells everyone on the show, instead of awkwardly ending the show in the midpoint of a show where genuinely the only thing people talk about is the second half of part 1. Listen, all I'm gonna say is that in an alternate world where the anime got the Jujutsu Kaisen treatment, no one would know who the fuck Gojo is, everyone would still be barking for Makima. So I ranked Chainsaw Man taking into account all of part 1 because I'm just too much of a fan to let this be below top 5. Sorry, not sorry. Actually, talking about the show for a second while avoiding spoilers, the reason we love Chainsaw Man is not even because of the cool devils or peak art style. I mean, obviously, of fucking course, that's part of it, but mainly it's because of Denji. Usually shonen protagonists represent some sort of larger than life figure that always has a seemingly insurmountable goal, but Denji doesn't have an insurmountable goal and he isn't larger than life. And if you say, well, he is larger than life because he's the Chainsaw Man, I can see where you're coming from, but from my perspective, a horny broke teenager whose life goal is to find a girlfriend doesn't seem larger than life to me. We love Denji because he's just a normal kid with shit morals. Everything else is just extra. Also, everything with the devils is just the coolest thing in the world. Chainsaw Man is something I've never seen anything like. It's like Fujimoto is inviting us to experience his own acid trip. And that sounds facetious, but I literally do not have any clue how else to describe it. Hunter x Hunter is the best shonen. Where do I start? So on the internet and even in real life, I've witnessed a ton of people just straight up hating on this masterpiece. I've always thought that there is a consensus or at least just popular opinion that Hunter x Hunter was one of the GOATs, but I guess that was just my warped biased perspective. So instead of glazing for a couple minutes then calling a day, I want to address some common criticisms that I always be seeing and give my own take on them. Gon's motivation and entire character is stupid. So if you don't know, Gon is literally a kid that just wants to find his dad that left to pick up some milk. A ton of motivations in this genre are inherently very egotistical. Like, I want to find the One Piece, or I want to become the Hokage, and that's fine, but are you really gonna hate on the 12-year-old because the outcome of his motivation wouldn't result in him saying, I am the Hunter x Hunter? Like, it seems very callous when the character is so young. I also personally adore everything that they've done with his character arcs right up until the end. And totally getting off course, but Killua is perfection when it comes to writing a character that contrasts with and highlights the good qualities of another character. I think we called that a foil in English class. And Leorio and Kurapika are straight up goats. The power system is overly convoluted and needlessly confusing. I am straight up passionate about this topic. This show has the greatest power system, hands down. Togashi somehow was able to craft a malleable system that is so balanced that any random Joe Schmo could just effortlessly body an entire criminal organization just because Joe is willing to sacrifice everything to kill them. It's so flexible and dynamic that I honestly wouldn't mind if it existed in the real world. Like, fuck, if the My Hero Academia power system were real and everyone were given a random predetermined quirk, and I got like some useless ass superpower like, I don't know, the ability to manifest a number 2 pencil whenever I take a standardized test. And then my friend got like some cool shit like flying or the power to instantly spawn in a toilet with a bidet at any time. I'd just end myself at that point. But if Nen existed on Earth, I'd go crazy. I'd restrict my powers to only work on like pedophiles or some menaces. So I'd be like a super powered Batman for Minecraft YouTubers. I realized that I didn't answer the question at all. Yeah, the Nen system is complex, but not so complex that it completely overrides the nuance it introduces into the fights and story. But that's just my opinion. Genthru is a horrible villain and the Greed Island arc is terrible. Well, yes, Greed Island is in my opinion the worst arc and Genthru is absolutely the worst villain. But even the worst arcs in this show are still good. Greed Island is a well thought out, mechanically rich world with an incredibly interesting culture. It honestly does isekai better than like 95% of the shit. Believe me, I would know. But compared to the absolutely stacked arc list that this show has, the actual events that happen in Greed Island come across as forgettable to a lot of fans. Largely because of Genthru, which I actually won't defend. He's like the one blemish in the show that you could absolutely make a valid case against. So there are a large number of people whose main concerns lie within the highly controversial Chimera Ant arc. To be completely transparent with all of you, the Chimera Ant arc is my favorite shonen arc of all time, hands down. It's a masterclass display of writing, world building, and absolutely beautiful character arcs. A lot of people have one of two complaints. Let's start with the first one: pacing. The first maybe 20 episodes are spent setting up for the absolute juggernaut that Togashi had planned. And this arc has probably the most newly introduced characters in any Hunter x Hunter arc, so it spends most of its runtime making us familiar with all these new faces. But it's not like we're not doing anything in the span of episodes. We get a vital training session, which is probably one of the most well done training arcs I've seen in any shonen. And then we get the absolute Go Ikalgo to make for a gay love triangle between Go and Kilo and him. Sure, the pacing is a little slow, but once we get to the meat of the arc, it becomes obvious why this slightly sluggish setup was necessary for the shockwaves that will soon be sent. The second criticism that I will see goes along the lines of the narrator is boring, or the narrator is lazy writing, or the narrator forces the pacing to come to a grinding halt, and I respectfully disagree. The narrator is an integral and necessary facet of this arc, so much so that if every single narration were to be removed, every character decision would seem senseless and irrational, and no character arc would hit remotely as hard because the audience would have no idea what's going on. By slowing everything down to a point where episodes can take up a few seconds in the actual world, Togashi enables himself to tell an actual story, instead of just letting those 2 seconds fly by without any context. The narrator is necessary to facilitate drama and actual narrative. And I do suppose that it's personal preference whether you fuck with this extremely slow paced, highly drama injected character exploration, because it's definitely not for everyone. If you come into the show seeking a traditional shonen and suddenly you're watching these characters develop until they literally pose a commentary on the human condition, I understand why some may hate this show for what it is. But I think it's pretty funny that I literally hail this anime as the GOAT for the same reasons a lot of people hate on it. Listen, I absolutely appreciate everyone who watched up until this point, whether you sat through the entire video or even just skipped here. These videos take a long time to make, as you could probably imagine, and to be completely honest, I don't make a lot of money from these videos from ads alone. That's just the nature of anime content. So if you want me to continue this type of content, I started a Patreon for those who have a spare like couple dollars. Oh, also, if you actually want to talk to me and if you're butthurt about any of the rankings, join the Discord. We can talk about it. Link is in the description. Oh, I know that this comment section is gonna eat me alive, but I kindly ask everyone to keep it civil down there. Of course, I couldn't make a list that would please everyone, and I didn't try to, but this list is just mostly my opinion, so everyone's gonna disagree with something, so it's inevitable. But that's no excuse for name calling or any of that dumb shit. Oh, and by the way, thank you all for the massive support from the last video. I heavily appreciate it. This is like my first video to actually do this well, and it's like surreal. And I only have you guys to thank, really. So thank you so much.